The clatter of mess kits, the lingering aroma of lukewarm coffee, and the dull hum of a generator filled Mess Hall 3 that crisp November night in 1944. Outside, the Texas air carried a faint chill, a stark contrast to the heat of the day, as guards made their rounds, their boots crunching on the gravel paths of Camp Swift. This was a prisoner of war camp, a temporary home for thousands of German soldiers captured across Europe, now far from the front lines. But on this particular evening, something quietly, unsettlingly went amiss. 4 men, German POWs, had walked into dinner just like hundreds of others. They were seen, they ate, and then, as the tables cleared and the guards prepared for the evening head count, they simply weren't there. Not missing in the chaos of an escape, but gone, vanished from a heavily secured facility without a single alarm, without a trace of a struggle. How could 4 soldiers, under constant watch, disappear so completely from a place designed to contain them? Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary historical puzzle, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? The initial confusion wasn't one of panic, but of quiet disbelief. Corporal Schmidt, a German-speaking American who often doubled as an informal interpreter, remembered the odd silence that settled over the mess hall. He recalled the flickering fluorescent lights, casting long, unsteady shadows as officers moved with an unusual, hushed urgency, their voices low, their expressions tight. Schmidt, whose duties brought him into daily contact with the prisoners, found himself reviewing faces, trying to recall any unusual behavior from the 4 men. Had they seemed agitated? Had they spoken of plans? He could remember nothing out of the ordinary, just the weariness common to men held captive, the same dull resignation he saw in so many others. There were no frantic searches, no immediate alerts to the local authorities in Taylor, Texas, just internal inquiries, hushed telegrams exchanged with Washington, and then a swift, almost unnatural closure to the matter. The official record for decades would simply list them as unaccounted for, a bureaucratic shrug in the face of an impossible disappearance. Why were these specific men among thousands singled out for such an enigmatic fate? 23 years drifted by, the war a fading memory for many, its scars still deep for others. In the meticulously organized, climate-controlled quiet of the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri, a civilian archivist named Evelyn Reed worked with the dedication of a historical detective. Evelyn, a woman with a keen eye for detail and an unwavering commitment to the integrity of the past, spent her days sifting through countless files, each holding fragments of lives touched by conflict. One afternoon, while reviewing a long-forgotten file from Camp Swift, a file that should have been complete, her fingers brushed against something unexpected. A single typewritten page, an unfiled addendum tucked away, almost deliberately hidden. It wasn't a death certificate, nor a repatriation order. It was dated November 1944, bearing the faded, official signature of a Captain Elias Vance. The document, an internal memo marked "Restricted Eyes Only," detailed an unscheduled, highly irregular transfer of 4 specific German POWs. Not to another camp, Evelyn noted, her brow furrowing, but to an unnamed special federal program operating under the direct authority of the War Department, with the explicit directive that their original records be flagged for administrative deletion. The language was vague, almost deliberately so, cloaked in officialese, but the implication was stark. These men weren't missing in the traditional sense. They had been deliberately, systematically erased from the formal system. What exactly was this special federal program that possessed the authority to make men simply vanish from the records? The implication of Captain Vance's memo was not just unsettling, it was a cold, hard fact. These men had not escaped, nor had they died in some unrecorded skirmish. They had been erased. Evelyn Reed, her fingers still resting on the faded document, felt the weight of that bureaucratic decision, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the archives. This wasn't a simple clerical error. This was a deliberate act of vanishing, sanctioned from within the very system designed to meticulously track every soldier, every prisoner. The question that had lingered for decades, how could four men simply disappear from a high-security facility, now had an answer, albeit one cloaked in unsettling officialese. The special federal program wasn't just a placeholder. It was a blank slate designed to make lives disappear. In the autumn of 1944, as the war in Europe intensified, Camp Swift was a bustling hub, its gravel roads echoing with the rumble of trucks and the distant shouts of training exercises. But the night of the disappearance, a different kind of activity unfolded behind closed doors. Hushed telegrams, marked urgent and eyes only, began to crisscross the nation, traveling between Camp Swift in Texas and the War Department in Washington, D.C. Major Arthur Jenkins, then a provost marshal officer at the camp, later recalled the strange atmosphere. He spoke of senior officers, usually precise and vocal, moving with a muted urgency, their voices barely above a whisper in the administrative offices where the faint scent of stale coffee and ink hung in the air. The initial internal investigation was brief, lasting mere days, its findings never widely disseminated. It wasn't about finding fugitives. It was about confirming a transfer and then, crucially, ensuring its absolute secrecy. The records of these 4 German POWs were not merely misplaced. They were flagged for administrative deletion, a term that carried the chilling weight of deliberate erasure. This wasn't an isolated incident in the grand tapestry of wartime operations. The sheer scale of World War II, the unprecedented demands of intelligence gathering, and the race for technological supremacy led to the creation of numerous shadowy initiatives. Historian Dr. Lena Hartmann, a specialist in classified wartime operations, notes that the War Department often operated outside conventional protocols, especially when national security was perceived to be at stake. The line between prisoner and asset, Dr. Hartmann explains, could become incredibly blurred, particularly when dealing with individuals possessing unique knowledge or skills. The memo signed by Captain Elias Vance, though sparse in detail, was a clear directive from a higher authority, indicating a program of significant strategic importance. But why these 4? What made them so uniquely valuable that their very identities had to be wiped clean from the official ledger? As we peel back these layers of wartime secrecy, it's clear that understanding these hidden histories requires a commitment to looking beyond the official narratives. If you find value in uncovering these untold stories from World War II, stories that challenge our understanding of the past, consider subscribing to WWW Stories. Your support helps us continue these deep dives into history's most intriguing paradoxes. The question of who these men were became paramount for Evelyn Reed. The memo didn't name them, only referred to them as 4 specific German POWs. Yet the very act of their targeted removal suggested they were not random selections. Were they scientists, engineers, cryptographers, or perhaps men with intimate knowledge of specific enemy installations or groundbreaking technologies? The War Department, in its desperate quest for any advantage, often sought out prisoners with specialized expertise. These individuals might have been identified through interrogation reports, or even through their own casual conversations overheard by interpreters like Corporal Schmidt. Their profiles, once meticulously cataloged in POW files, would have been scrutinized, their skills assessed for potential utility to the Allied cause. The sterile hum of the record center seemed to amplify the silence around their true identities, a void created by design. The sterile hum of the record center seemed to amplify the silence around their true identities, a void created by design. Evelyn Reed knew that for the War Department to go to such lengths, administrative deletion was not a phrase used lightly. These 4 German POWs must have possessed knowledge deemed critical, perhaps even existential, to the Allied war effort. The desperate race for technological supremacy, the atomic bomb, advanced rocketry, new submarine designs, these were the shadows that loomed over the final years of the war. Every scrap of intelligence, every unique skill set, was a potential advantage. Consider the frantic atmosphere in Washington, D.C. during those years. The air in the War Department offices would have been thick with cigarette smoke and the clatter of typewriters, the constant murmur of urgent conversations. Intelligence officers, their faces etched with fatigue, pored over interrogation reports, searching for any mention of specialists, any hint of expertise that could be exploited. Dr. Marcus Thorne, a retired intelligence analyst and author of Shadow Wars, Human in World War II, describes this period as a fishing expedition in a sea of secrets. He notes that the Allied forces weren't just looking for battle plans. They were actively scouting for human capital. If a prisoner could build a V-2 rocket, or knew the schematics of a new U-boat engine, or understood advanced cryptography, their value shifted dramatically from mere enemy combatant to potential strategic asset, Dr. Thorne explains. This shift in perception could mean the difference between a POW camp and a highly classified, off-the-books assignment. The process of identifying such individuals was often covert, relying on a network of interpreters and embedded intelligence personnel within the POW camps. Corporal Schmidt, for instance, in his daily interactions, might have unwittingly provided crucial insights into the prisoners' backgrounds, their pre-war professions, or even their casual opinions on technical matters. A seemingly innocuous conversation about a specific engine type or a chemical process could be flagged, cross-referenced with other intelligence, and slowly a profile would emerge. It was a painstaking, almost invisible form of espionage, where the target was already within reach. The faint scent of stale coffee and damp earth, typical of a busy mess hall, would have masked the quiet surveillance. For the 4 men from Camp Swift, their selection was not arbitrary. It implied a specific, acute need that transcended the standard protocols of prisoner management. Their expertise, whatever it was deemed so vital that their identities needed to be scrubbed clean, their existence as German POWs nullified. This wasn't about preventing escape, it was about preventing discovery. Discovery of what they knew, or perhaps, discovery of what they were now being asked to do. The memo's phrase, Special Federal Program, hinted at an operation designed to be impenetrable, a black hole in the bureaucratic universe. What kind of program would require such an extreme level of secrecy? And what was the true nature of their new, unrecorded existence? The files Evelyn held spoke volumes in their silence. The absence of follow-up reports, the lack of any subsequent mention of these 4 men, was deafening. It suggested not just a transfer, but an absorption, a complete integration into a new clandestine purpose. Historians like Dr. Lena Hartman suggest that programs of this nature often involved either advanced debriefing and exploitation of technical knowledge, or, in rarer cases, recruitment into intelligence operations, sometimes even on American soil under new identities. The stakes were incredibly high, and the ethical lines often blurred in the fog of war. The very idea that men, once enemies, could be transformed into ghost operatives, working in the shadows for their former adversaries, was a chilling testament to the pressures of global conflict. It made Evelyn wonder, as the fluorescent lights hummed above her, if these men ever truly reappeared, or if their lives, as they knew them, ended that night in Camp Swift. Evelyn couldn't dismiss the memo as an anomaly. Her archivist's instinct, honed over decades, told her this was a deliberate act, a meticulously orchestrated vanishing. The paper felt thin, almost brittle under her gloved fingers, a physical testament to a bureaucratic erasure. She began to cross-reference the memo's date, November 1944, with other classified directives from the War Department, hoping to find a parallel, a whisper of a related operation. The air conditioning hummed, a constant low drone, a counterpoint to the silence of erased histories, the chill in the room doing little to calm the growing unease she felt. Lena Hartman, in her extensive research, has documented how the urgency of war often led to morally ambiguous programs. The Geneva Conventions, Dr. Hartman explains, were sometimes treated as guidelines, not absolute laws when national security was deemed paramount. She points to instances where high-value prisoners were detained in unofficial capacities, their rights suspended in the name of intelligence. The special federal program mentioned by Captain Vance likely operated in this gray zone, a shadow operation designed to exploit unique assets. But what specific kind of assets were these 4 men, and what was the true nature of their involuntary recruitment? The possibility that these German POWs were not merely debriefed, but actively recruited, presented a stark ethical quandary. Imagine the pressure, a choice between endless captivity, potentially facing war crimes charges, or a chance at a new life, albeit one shrouded in secrecy, working for the very nation they had fought against. The smell of old paper and dust motes dancing in the archival light seemed to carry the weight of those unspoken compromises. What kind of bargaining chips would the War Department have held? Promises of immunity? Safe passage for families back in a shattered Germany? This wasn't just about extracting information. The phrase administrative deletion implied a more permanent, transformative process. Dr. Marcus Thorne elaborates on this, suggesting that some programs aimed not just to gain intelligence, but to repurpose individuals entirely. He cites examples, albeit often from later periods, where defectors or high-value prisoners were given new identities, integrated into society, and tasked with ongoing intelligence work. The idea of German soldiers, once enemies, living under new names in the United States, perhaps even contributing to the post-war intelligence apparatus, was a profound twist in the narrative of wartime loyalties. What kind of life awaited them, stripped of their original identities, their pasts officially non-existent? Evelyn, with a meticulousness that defined her career, sought any peripheral document that might allude to such a program. She pulled records related to Camp Swift's intelligence operations during that specific period, sifting through hundreds of pages of mundane reports. The soft rustle of aged documents was the only sound breaking the silence of her concentration. She looked for unusual budget allocations, unexplained travel orders for officers, or even cryptic references in declassified memos that, when viewed through the lens of Vance's document, might suddenly gain new meaning. She found a series of requisitions for unusual equipment, specialized recording devices, high-frequency radio components, dated around November 1944, approved by a joint intelligence committee, but with no specified end user. This wasn't definitive proof, but an intriguing thread, a faint echo of clandestine activity. The concept of administrative deletion was a bureaucratic black hole designed to swallow individuals whole. It wasn't about public record or even military accountability in the traditional sense. It was about creating a controlled void. Captain Vance's signature wasn't just a mark of authority. It was a seal on a secret pact, a pact that traded identity for utility. This level of secrecy hinted at something far beyond simple interrogation. It suggested a strategic imperative, perhaps even a long-term investment in these men. Were they perhaps involved in early Cold War efforts, even before the last shots of World War II had faded? The implications stretched far beyond 1944, touching upon the very foundations of post-war intelligence. The specific skills these men possessed, which led to their selection, remained a ghost in the machine. Evelyn pondered the sheer audacity of such an operation, to pluck 4 men from a POW camp, erase their past, and repurpose their futures, all under the cloak of a special federal program. The smooth, cool surface of her oak desk felt solid beneath her hand, a stark contrast to the shifting sands of these hidden histories. It begged the question, if these men were so valuable, what was the ultimate price of their silence and cooperation? And did they pay it willingly, or was it exacted by the harsh realities of war? And how long could such a secret truly remain buried? The scent of dried paper, almost sweet, filled Evelyn's nostrils as she meticulously reviewed the adjacent folders. The special federal program mentioned in Captain Vance's memo wasn't an isolated anomaly. It was a symptom of a larger, more clandestine network. These weren't simply prisoners being moved. They were individuals being strategically repurposed. Historian Dr. Robert Oppenheim, an authority on wartime intelligence ethics, often points to the ends justify the means mentality prevalent in the highest echelons of the War Department during this period. A pressure to win, to gain any advantage, meant stretching, if not outright breaking, established conventions. He noted in his seminal work, The Unseen Hand, the notion of administrative deletion thus became a tool, a bureaucratic sleight of hand, to facilitate operations that simply could not exist on the official ledger. For the 4 German POWs, this directive meant a complete severance from their former lives. Imagine the stark transition from the enclosed, monotonous routine of Camp Swift, with its dusty paths and predictable meals, to an unknown existence dictated by the War Department. Their uniforms, their names, their very identities as soldiers of the Wehrmacht were stripped away, replaced by a void. What did they wear now? What names did they answer to? The silence of the archives seemed to deepen, amplifying the unspoken questions about their daily realities. Did they live in secluded safe houses? Were they assigned new tasks, perhaps even forced to use their skills against their former homeland? The choices presented to them, if any, would have been profoundly asymmetrical, skewed by their status as prisoners of war. The ethical tightrope walked by American officials involved in such programs was precarious. Captain Vance, whose faded signature graced the memo, would have been operating under direct orders, likely from very senior military intelligence. His role was not to question the morality, but to ensure the precise execution of a highly sensitive directive. The weight of such decisions, the knowledge of men being disappeared from official history, would have pressed down on those involved. The faint clatter of typewriters in distant offices, the hushed phone calls, the late-night meetings, these were the sounds and scenes of a bureaucracy bending its own rules, justifying extraordinary measures in the name of national security. This wasn't just about a change of scenery. It was a psychological transformation, a coerced reinvention. Dr. Elena Petrova, a psychologist specializing in identity and trauma in wartime, notes that the systematic dismantling of an individual's identity, even if for a perceived greater good, leaves an indelible mark. These men, once German soldiers, were now forced into a liminal space, neither fully free nor officially captive. They were ghost figures, walking through a world that officially denied their existence. The very concept of their new life would have been a paradox in itself, freedom bought at the cost of true self. Evelyn, tracing the faint impression of the typewritten words with her finger, felt the cold weight of this historical reality. The official narrative of the war, meticulously documented in millions of files, often obscured these deeply personal and morally complex subplots. The Special Federal Program was a black box, a repository of secrets that touched on the very definition of loyalty, identity, and sacrifice. The very air in the record center, usually so still, seemed to vibrate with the unspoken stories of these 4 men, their lives rewritten by a stroke of a pen. The nature of their expertise, the reason they were selected, remained the pivotal unanswered question. Were they rocket scientists, like those later recruited in Operation Paperclip? Perhaps experts in advanced metallurgy, crucial for new weapon designs, or perhaps even cryptographers capable of breaking sophisticated German codes. The War Department's relentless pursuit of intellectual capital during the war was well documented. A telegram from General Leslie Groves to the Secretary of War, dated early 1945, though unrelated to Camp Swift, emphasized the critical need to secure enemy scientific personnel, by any means necessary, to prevent their exploitation by hostile powers and to advance our own strategic capabilities. This broader policy, while later formalized, certainly set the stage for such clandestine programs. The silence surrounding these 4 men wasn't accidental. It was painstakingly constructed. Their families back in Germany, receiving no word, would have endured decades of agonizing uncertainty, eventually resigning themselves to the vast, anonymous casualties of war. The local newspaper in Taylor, Texas, as Evelyn confirmed through old microfiches, never carried a story, never hinted at the strange disappearance. The historical record, for decades, remained pristine, untouched by this bureaucratic vanishing act. This intentional void, created and maintained for over 2 decades, was a testament to the program's enduring secrecy and the depth of its implications. Evelyn knew that the true shocking clue wasn't just that these men vanished, but why they vanished, and what their hidden lives ultimately entailed. The faded signature of Captain Elias Vance on that single, unfiled page wasn't just a signature. It was the key to unlocking a profound recontextualization of a small forgotten corner of World War II history. The cold, crisp air of the archive seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the full story to unfold. Evelyn Reed's discovery, tucked away in that St. Louis archive, didn't just unearth a forgotten document. It exposed a profound truth about wartime expediency. The special federal program wasn't some shadowy fringe operation, but a calculated, albeit unacknowledged, strategy by the War Department. It was a precursor to later, more formalized initiatives, hinting at the depths to which the U.S. government would go to secure intellectual capital. The 4 German POWs, stripped of their identities, were likely absorbed into this hidden workforce, their skills deemed invaluable to American post-war technological and intelligence superiority. Their disappearance from Camp Swift, once a baffling paradox of men vanishing into thin air, now made chilling, if morally complex, sense as a meticulously planned act of bureaucratic stealth. They weren't missing, they were repurposed, their lives redirected by a directive marked restricted, eyes only. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights above Evelyn's desk seemed to amplify the whispers of countless similar secrets still buried in forgotten files, a testament to the lengths nations went to in the crucible of war. This kind of historical anomaly forces us to question the narratives we think we know, pushing us to look deeper into the shadows where history truly unfolds. What other hidden chapters of World War II do you believe are waiting to be uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're as fascinated by these untold stories as we are, make sure to subscribe to World War II Stories for more deep dives into the past.